Right. So as always, give yourself a few moments to think about your posture, how it feels to sit in the chair, and just rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Shoulder, your arm. Side. Up your chest. And then your belly. Resting back in the chair. Feet out in front in the reclining position, deck chair style. Settling back, feeling your weight dropping into the chair. Just be aware that these, the opening few minutes of a class, just like when we start to practice on our own, are really the vital minutes. They're the ones where when we have some kind of previous experience, we have a sense of what we're doing this for. These are the ones where we sort of prepare those different elements, rooting down, the alignment of the body, feeling the connection in the body, maybe breathing and so on and so forth. We kind of get them in place. We can't necessarily do them at the moment, but we're aware that this is what we're wanting to move towards. So with that as a kind of overall intent, we've got more chance of bringing them in to our movements later on. Another really important aspect is the focusing of attention that takes. So this also engages our mind and it brings up that meditational element of the art. Such a key purpose. So feeling your weight dropping back, noticing any change in your body without really any reference to whether it's sort of the right change or not in the first instance. This would be, if you like, what we might refer to using modern terminology, that the mindfulness element of the art, simply observing, simply being aware of all that is going on. You bring yourself to the upright position. I try and be quite careful about how I use terms like mindfulness, because I think it's these days it's a term that can invoke some very popular images that I think are quite good images in many ways. I think it's a very positive thing. But yesterday was Mental Health Awareness Day, and social media and that understandably had a lot of images connected with what we think of as mindfulness. These lovely images of water coming down a waterfall, a flower in the sunlight, birds flying around, so on and so forth. These are all lovely images, but we need to be careful about how we use them, and that we don't assume that that is mindfulness. What we're seeing there is one possible outcome of the practice of mindfulness. But it's always interesting to compare. You can stand watching, say, the starlings coming to roost, and that's quite a different experience to watching it on a film. It's usually quite cold in my experience, for one thing. There are areas of discomfort. There are other birds trying to prey on them, and so on and so forth. And so there's another aspect when we come when we notice all things, it's not all pretty. And we can just form the impression that somehow, if we don't get these pretty results, these nice images and nice feelings, that somehow we've failed in that process of mindfulness. And it really isn't the case. So we don't want to get stuck on these particular images. What we do want to do is to bring our attention more deeply into the body, to use an awareness of the body, our posture and our movement, to sort of deepen that sense of simply being still, if you like, or spacious, whatever you might associate with this. And then we extend that to the movements. So as we start to move, we try and maintain that element of awareness, noticing things like the smoothness, the flow of the movement, and also noticing where there isn't that smoothness, where there isn't that flow, where there's a little kind of like a bit of tension, or just something not quite working in the way that you would want it to. And then your shoulders and backwards. So mindfulness as a technique doesn't exist in isolation in its traditional form. And that aspect of mindfulness that I was talking about, the pictures of the flowers, doesn't exist in isolation. It's much broader and deeper than that in many ways. So don't think that if your experience isn't always that lovely kind of positive experience, either in meditation or indeed in Tai Chi, don't think you're somehow failing in going forwards. Then hands down to your sides. The thing to be really interested in trying to cultivate are those moments when we do get that sense of the stillness, the spaciousness, where we realize it's possible to be in contact with everything that's going on without necessarily sort of clinging to it in a way. And then winding around. Back the other way. Resting your hand, easing forwards, and then feeling your hips drop back in the chair, drawing you back to the upright. Notice how that feels in your back and your shoulders. And there or anywhere else in your body, just be aware of anywhere that is beginning to stiffen up or is somehow gripping or tightening. And as always, work very gently around those areas. Don't force the movements. Part of what we become aware of is just over a period of time, from day to day, from class to class, there are these differences, but not always the same. Well, we're not the same person. Things change, weather changes, our circumstances change. Sometimes this movement will feel very smooth, other times it will feel a bit awkward. This is just completely normal. And again, doesn't represent a failure. turn a little. And then in the other direction. So your weight moving diagonally across the body, and then rotating in the middle of your body, drawing your head and shoulders around in a small circle, and in between your hips and your pelvis and your head, the spine kind of floating around a little bit as much as possible. And again, just recognizing any stiffness, any tightness there. And then back in the other direction. Back to the center. One heel up, step forward. Make sure you get the whole foot on the floor. Maybe even you can apply gentle pressure downwards through the floor. On the other side. And bring your feet back. One image of the sort of what you might think of as the meditational process that I've always found really helpful some years ago came from a meditation, not a Tai Chi teacher, where he described meditation as being like sitting on a riverbank. And you sit on the riverbank and the river's flowing past you. The river's like your thoughts. You're not trying to stop thinking. You're not trying to stop the river flowing or redirect it, or you're not even necessarily, you're not trying to analyze it. You're not trying to shape it into something different. You're just sitting on the riverbank. Says the problem is that what happens is we fall into the riverbank. We fall into the river frequently. So suddenly we find, you might have a thought, I'm a bit hungry. Think, yeah, maybe I should go and get something. Which shop shall I go to? Actually, no, I won't go to that one. I'll go to that one tomorrow. So I've got to do a big shop, and I might have a look and see, and so on. One thought leads to another, and you end up floating down the river. And he described the response to that as being very, very simple. When you realise you're in the river, climb out on the riverbank again. It's that simple. There's no kind of judgment involved. Sometimes the water might be cold and uncomfortable. Other times it might be very pleasant, but it doesn't matter. All you've got to do is come back on the riverbank. And you could view everything that we do in Tai Chi as being a way of constructing that riverbank, that kind of structure within which we can get a sense of being still and quiet, whatever label you care to associate it with, but we're not separated off. We're not pretending the river isn't there. This isn't a kind of altered state or anything like that. It's very, very real in that sense. So whenever you get distracted while you're doing the movements are there to just give you that resting place for a few moments. So bird folds its wings, weight back in your hips, hands facing forwards, easing forwards and pushing back. So this is not an either or choice. There's a phrase in Tai Chi classics that says that, well, it's two things. One is we should seek the stillness within the movement. In other words, don't stop moving and find stillness that way, but actually look for that still quality, look for the riverbank next to the river rather than somewhere else. Because from the riverbank, we can start to view the river differently, just by nature of the fact that we're no longer in it. The other phrase that comes to mind is, I suppose appropriately, be still as a mountain, move like a great river. It doesn't say be still as a mountain or move like a great river. It's not a choice, it's an acknowledgement that both those elements, key elements that we start to appreciate right at the beginning of the practice, that they're interdependent, if you like. And so gradually we start to get a sense for, you know, what is happening in the river. As we sit there, we see more and more. And so, you know, we can begin to engage with all of that in a much more creative, conscious way. Change into fisherman cast a net, feeling the weight of your arms hanging from your body, movement in your back, spine, and chest, and ribs. Soften your shoulders, elbows, wrists, joints of your hands and fingers. Feeling your weight moving. A little change in the pressure of your weight, from pressing down through your feet, and then back, pressing down through hips, buttocks, lower back, and then into your feet again. A constant dynamic. When there's a sense of stillness, we're more likely to get that sense of a balanced, harmonious movement within our body. It's also true that harmony of movement helps to develop stillness. Once again, it's not either or. This time imagine the ball behind your arms coming back, drawing your hands over the ball. There's a slight pull with your fingers, hands and arms. Almost as though if the ball were quite heavy, what you would do is you have your hands on the ball, you go back and you engage with the ball, and then it would start to move. The sun changing to the pigeon spreads its wings, chest opening, closing. As it closes, your upper back opening, and then in its turn closing. One more time. Coming back into pushing wave, starting in your hips. A gentle push down, coming through your back, out through the front of your body, and then withdraw. When I talk about the wave, it starts in your hips. It comes forwards, out through the front of your body, but it's also dropping down in your legs. So there's a sort of natural point of fullness, and one of those little sort of punctuation points in that position as well as at the back. It's quite useful to think in terms of those punctuation points as moments when we can collect ourselves. In any particular movement, at any particular time, you might make a mistake. You know, I might, for instance, here, as I go forward, my hands might not be in quite the right position. They're slightly turned in. Well, I made a mistake there. And if I hang on, oh, I've got to do something about the hand, but actually I can take a break here. I can take a break here. I know how to do the movement. I'll just do it better next time. I don't have to analyze the mistake. That stillness enables me to identify the pattern, the flow, and identify where the pattern isn't working, rather than again getting caught up. Oh, I've got to do this with the hand. I need to do that. I wonder what that. I need to ask that, and so on and so forth. It's just a simple response. One more time. And then hands fisted. From that point of view, the more mistakes you make, the better, because that gives you more and more opportunity just to bounce back onto the riverbank. And that's one of the great benefits. Our thoughts get carried away, the stress and the anxieties of situations, both personal and more broadly, drag us along, and it's like running downhill. So those little moments of settling, coming back to the riverbank, actually break the momentum of that. They'll still come back, but we learn to punctuate. We learn to have those little gaps, those spaces. One of the great benefits of Tai Chi, I think. One more time. Turning your hands out. Last time. And then polishing the table. Turn your hands palm down, turning in the center. The movements themselves reflect that idea that we extend out in our attention and we draw back, extend out and draw back. Because the movements themselves, you can see here, extension, contraction, extension, and contraction. So we're not being told that extending out is a bad thing, that being aware of the river or even being in the river is a bad thing. We're just giving ourselves further options, really. We're giving ourselves choices. Also, perhaps recognizing in Tai Chi terms that it's very much not either or. The stillness, the withdrawing is the prelude to the extension, and the extension, done correctly, just naturally comes back to the center and drawing in. One more time. And then turning your hands palm up, pushing up and sinking down, trying to feel that the movement begins with that gentle press down through feet and hips. Your head is going up slightly. That's the mean to draw the hands up. One more time. Changing. Wild goose. But expanding and contracting. And then parting the clouds. Slightly forward so let your hands cross in front of your knees. Back into your hips to push up. Now go back to rooting down. Doing these is a sequence of 3. And just noting the point of change. Again, point of change, point of stillness. Don't rush at this. Very tempting, especially what comes next, sort of dash to do the next movement. But we want to try and do the opposite. Now change into dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Notice that there is very often this amazing urge to rush from one point to another, from one movement to another, from one stage of a movement to another. And just gently change that, not by sort of It's not like applying a brake when you're driving along or cycling along, not a sudden stop. It's just a recognition that when we can bring that focus attention to bear on the movement, that this isn't simply left, right, left, right, left, right, but a transition from left to right, from right to left. And so following that line across in your mind's eye. This isn't just about the upward movement, the downward movement is just as slow as, you know, we feel a great deal going on in that pulling down. One more on each side. And then after this one, changing two-way push. Within the body, the quality of the movement is sometimes described as massaging. It has that soft releasing quality. You could argue that the effect of the movement on our minds is similar, not in a kind of soporific way, but in a sense of just, again, through that stillness, given the chance to kind of untangle the knots. One more round. Extend one foot to rest on your heel, knees slightly bent, scooping the sea and looking at the sky. And then grasping the tiger's ears. Change sides. Start with scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Well, it stays predominantly back here, so there is this lengthening for your back that you could nearly describe as a stretch. Nearly. And then tiger's grasping the tiger's ears. One more time. And then just rest for a moment, reinforcing this feeling of posture, that curious combination of a quality of quiet and stillness. You get that the weight sinking down, contact with the ground through hips and feet, with the focusing of our attention just enabling our thoughts to withdraw slightly. But also with that, the natural movements within your body, the movement of your breath, maybe movements as your body adjusts to whatever's underneath it. Okay, and then open your hands together. Tapping over your face again. Over your head and neck. One shoulder. Your arm. One side. Okay. Your knees up and down, get the legs working and the calves and thighs and the soles of your feet. And then around in a circle. Back the other way. Good, and then standing. As always, I'm going to move my chair out of the way, but as always, you can keep the chair there for to just help you investigate these movements with a little bit more stability. Standing with your feet hip width apart, and I'm going to come a bit closer because I want you to just very gently rock your weight forwards and backwards. You don't want your toes and your heels to come off the floor. So this restricts the movement to really just a movement through the arch of your foot, from the ball of your foot to the front part of your heel and back, and a pivoting from your ankle. Soften your knees and your hips. Bring your hands up. Just rest your elbows against your sides, wherever's comfortable, and have your hands in front. Imagine carrying a tray of drinks. So it's an interesting image because if you're walking through a room and you've got a tray of drinks, you're definitely walking, but as you're moving, you're trying to keep your hands still. They're doing something, they're active, but you try and not, you don't walk around with a tray of drinks going, oh yeah, I've got this. So this we really feel through our arms and our hands when we get it right. This combination of stillness and movement. Then imagine there's a table in front of you. What you're going to do is your body goes forwards a little bit, but then your arms extend very carefully as though you're putting the tray on the table. And then when you go back, it's as though you're picking it up. So this exercise helps you to get a sense for how the arms feel in all the movements. This quieter quality, even though it's really quite a dynamic practice. We also start to identify, those of you who've done this before, you're familiar with this idea, that somewhere between that forward position and the rear position, there's a point of equilibrium, a point of balance, if you prefer that term. See if you can feel that as you pass through it. I've used this image before. If you imagine this pole as being like the center line of my body, come that roughly from the crown of my head when I stand here. But when I go forwards, I'm not overbalancing. It's quite a strong position, but it's okay. And I can go back to here. Not very far today, as it happens. But then eventually, I also identify this bit while I'm going through the middle. So see if you can find that, and then bring your weight back in to your heels. Go forwards to that point, and instead of going past it, let your hips sink back and down. Bring your hands around as though you're cradling a ball, pushing up with that same quality of quietness and stillness. And then sinking down, change into the wild goose in that moment of settling. Expanding and contracting. Now change into parting the clouds. Expanding and contracting. Again, rooting down. My throat is a bit dry. Take your time, and in particular, if you get to a certain point, you think, oh, what comes next? I've forgotten. Rather than speeding up, slow down, come back to the riverbank for a moment. It may not make any difference. You may still be confused, but you'll feel better about it. You have to remind yourself, everybody will get the sequence wrong. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. That's as real and as relevant as those times when it goes really well. The response to both is always to seek that stillness within the movement. And then just let your hands drop down. 1 foot forwards and transferring your weight. So hip width across your feet. Take the time to think about your stance. if nothing else, what that does is remind you to bring your attention into your body, because there's a good chance, and particularly those, when you know the exercise, right, this exercise, and they're thinking, oh, what should I do this afternoon? Or I could do with a cup of tea. So, oh, no, my feet are in the wrong position. That brings you back. Raising your toes and your hips. When you experience that little moment of, you're wobbling, which we all get at times, see if you can just once again come back to the ground. That image of the riverbank is a useful one to you. This is where it's really useful to be in an environment where you feel safe to play with that idea. And this is really what we're doing. When we're out there walking down the road and we have a wobble, it's not necessarily the time to start practicing Tai Chi, but because we're practicing, it's not when you practice anything else, you could be next to a wall. So if you do get that little wobble, you think, oh, no, I've got time just to settle. You can build your confidence that way. And then stepping in. And on the other side, go and check your stance. Raising your toes and your heel. Stepping in. And then step through. Notice how my foot swings out. So your leg as it comes in will come in towards the supporting leg and swing out, makes this little semicircular pattern. But before that, your attention going down and into your foot, your weight going down into your foot. And then reversing the movement. Bring your feet parallel. Give your legs a shake. Let's do fisherman castanet. And your arms swinging through. Hips, shoulders, direction of the movement, all forwards and backwards, and your arms following that. Sink back and turn towards your front foot. Wind blows the willows. So now that we change in the center of the body, the arms change. So effectively, the point of change is also that point where we're most likely to recognize that quietness, that stillness. And in fact, if anything, that will help to facilitate that. We move the weight forward, we settle down, we feel the ground beneath our feet, and we just let the center turn and observe how our arms follow that. On the other side. So, check your stance. Fisherman castanet. And then sit back and turn. Just open up your front foot, turn it out a little bit, bring back foot in, step through, dragonfly skims the water. And then going back in the other direction if you're already going back. Nothing wrong with bringing the foot in and putting it here. So, you know, especially if it feels a bit wobbly, you'll see me do it sometimes. So, oops, and then I'm going to come back to the riverbank here. I'm not just going to sort of plunge ahead. And okay, sometimes I can do it like this. Sometimes I can't. You know, there's a lot of different factors involved in that. Let's try one more round going forwards. Come to here. And this is the point where you decide. Do I put my foot down or do I try and lift my foot up? So just put my foot down, or have I arrived at the riverbank? And if I have, then I don't have to sort of like find it again, but I'm like, oh, I'm better. Yeah, now I can step forward and it's fine. And then again, in the other direction. So some moment to moment awareness. There are any number of factors that may affect us. One more time. Good, and repeat. Shake out. And things that can affect you, you might be tired, you might be a bit distracted, you might have sort of like a lot going on or something happening that keeps popping up. I noticed a few weeks ago when I was doing this filming, I had a soft mat to stand on. I didn't realize until I tried to do the walking and things like that, the softness of the mat made it quite difficult because it gave. I'm used to a hard surface. There are all sorts of things that can get in the way, and that can change from moment to moment, of course. So this idea of coming back to the riverbank to punctuate the movements, and I was talking about the punctuation of the movements, is really very, very important. There's a growing body of evidence out there, which is why we get all the images these days, that this kind of thing is actually very, very beneficial for our well-being, both physical and mental. And so we can learn to do it for ourselves, if you see what I mean, through the patterning of the Tai Chi. So now coming back to the mountain, or if you prefer, coming back to the river, the labeling is very personal, I think. Pushing out and up, bringing your arms around as though you're holding the ball, drawing in and settling. One more round. And rest. Okay, and just open your eyes. That went very quickly again. It always seems to go very quickly, doesn't it? Thank you very much, everybody. So